Let's have a look at some of the most common houseplant care fails I see again and again in my YouTube video comments section and on Instagram, and the advice I give to solve them. There are tons of super tips and tricks in this video, so if you've got a problem with your plant, you're bound to find the solution here. I have issues with my Chinese money plant. As soon as I think it's looking good, the bottom leaves just start dropping, looking lifeless and dropping off. There are just a few healthy looking leaves at the top and then a long stalk. I only water it when the top few inches of soil are dry. It's in quite a low light area. I've got to say, this problem with the Chinese money plant is just so common. I've seen lots and lots of comments from stressed out plant parents, and honestly, there's not a great deal you can do to stop this from happening. This is the natural growth habit of this plant. As it gets taller, it focuses its growing energy at the top of the plant, and this naturally means that the lower stalks become the forgotten children and fall off over time. Give it lots of light and don't let it dry out too much, and you should slow this process down somewhat. Mine in my living room certainly looks a lot like Naomi's. Scott left a comment on my jade plant propagation video. I find broken jade leaves that have broken off in my big box stores. I bring them home to allow them to callus over and put them in a glass vessel with water. I allow the leaves to grow roots, which they typically do, and grow to a length of 2 to 3 inches. Then I pop them up into some cactus mix. The last 2 rooted leaves ended up dying. The leaves shriveled up and the roots didn't take. This is a propagation fail that happens all the time. We successfully root our cuttings in water, developing cuttings with nice long white roots to be proud of, transplant to soil, and watch the plant inexplicably die. This is usually down to improper watering. You can see the cuttings have developed roots in water. It's grown water roots. They now need to adapt to soil. This means we need to keep the soil nice and moist for the first few weeks for the roots to adapt. Once the soil dries out, the roots die off, ruining all those months of work. A comment from Delta Tango left on one of my videos is a major plant fail, and I was absolutely shocked when I first read it. I just bought a Ficus Elastica in a tiny pot about 10 or 11 inches tall from a plant shop down my street, and the shop owner told me that the Ficus Elastica likes to stay moist. It does not want to dry out between watering because if it does, it won't want to ever branch out. Also, he said he waters daily. We both have south-facing windows, so maybe that's why. I'd love to know who this plant shop owner is, because watering any plant daily is probably the most effective way to kill it, let alone a Ficus Elastica, even if it does live on a hot sunny south-facing windowsill. In my experience, ficus plants prefer a drier soil. They definitely don't want to be watered every day. This just causes so many root rot issues. I've personally never come across the idea that ficus need moist soil to branch out. The only way I know to branch out a ficus is to cut the stem back or to notch the stem. If anyone can shed more light on this theory, then please leave it in the comments. Millie left a comment on a video that is a super common fail and stems from a misconception about humidity. Does placing small bowls with water next to the plants increase the humidity? In a word, no. It may increase air humidity at a microscopic level, but there'll be nowhere near enough of an increase to have any impact on our indoor plants. This is very similar to the tray of pebbles with water hack that lots of folks place their plants on to increase humidity around their plants. And I mentioned this in my houseplant myth busting video that you should check out after this. The only thing that will reliably increase air humidity is a dedicated humidifier left on for many hours a day. Paolo shared some pictures of his Monstera deliciosa that wasn't growing any new leaves on Instagram and wondered where the new leaf would come from. Monsteras dramatically slow their rate of growth when they're not getting enough light. It's super common for folks to think that this plant can live in dark spots in their home, but this fella absolutely needs as much light as you can give it. Not only will it grow leaves quicker, it will also develop fenestrations and perforations in the leaves at a much quicker rate. And the next leaf will always grow from the last leaf that developed. Take a close look at the petiole and you'll see a little bump on the side. This is where the leaf will sprout from. I have a bad habit of neglecting my plants in the winter. Now that spring is coming, I'm paying more attention and my rubber plant is looking a little worse for wear. The stem is really wrinkly and the leaves are all droopy. Do you think it still has a chance of bouncing back by summer? Am I better off trying to propagate it and cut it back to try and start over? It stopped losing leaves, but it looks so pitiful. I'm so thankful that winter is nearly over and spring is finally springing. It's not uncommon for our plants to look a little bit shabby during the winter. They are tropical plants after all, so they're not really used to the cold, short days. Before doing anything drastic, I always recommend waiting it out until spring is in full swing. It's surprising how much better our plants look when growth really kicks into gear. New growth replaces old foliage that has been deteriorating over winter with a much happier looking plant. If your ficus is still looking bad, then cutting it back is a good idea. I did this to mine, and not only is it looking much better, I also got lots of propagations to fill my house with. My favourite ZZ plant has taken a turn for the worse. I'm not sure if I overwatered it last month or it has a disease, but it's very limp and the bottom of the stems are soft and brown. Should I cut the stems and try regrowing, or have I killed it? Sadly, this is a plant fail that is all too common for the ZZ plant. Most folks don't realise that these plants grow from massive potato-like rhizomes in the soil from which it stores huge amounts of water and water it like they would their philodendron. This is too frequent for the plant, resulting in soft rhizomes and mushy stalks from overwatering. I probably water my ZZ plant about 3 or 4 times a year. Any more than this and you start to see the issues plaguing Hannah's plant. Cut out the mushy stems at the base and wait for the soil to dry out. With any luck, it should bounce back. And check out my full care guide on this plant after this. Our peace lily has started to droop. Any tips please? We repotted it including perlite, no overwatering. This is a notorious problem for the ever popular peace lily. Not only do people struggle to get them to reflower when they get them home, but they often see them droop. In most cases this is because you are not giving it enough water. It needs more water than most indoor plants. As soon as the soil is slightly dry, it shows us by drooping its leaves. It's no big deal because this plant has incredible bounce back ability. It often rises like a phoenix just when you think it's on death's door. I've put some cuttings in water, not too high, change every couple of days, but the bottom edge of some look like they're rotting. What should I do differently? If your cuttings are rotting before they've developed roots, then I'll bet they're not getting enough light. Whenever my cuttings have been sat for weeks without any sign of roots, I move them underneath my grow lights and bam, within a week or so roots appear. And this is especially true if you propagate anything in the winter. The light is just not bright enough, so stick them under some grow lights, job done. Tradescantia, would you suggest allowing this plant to climb a moss pole? Tradescantias aren't really climbers, they're more crawlers. They like to crawl along the floor and take over a field rather than up surrounding trees etc. like a pothos. You're better off picking a shallow pot with a large diameter that the plant can extend its stems into, creating a really bushy plant. As soon as you get long stems tied to a moss pole, they'll start to die back because the nodes don't have soil to grow into. And my recent video on this goes into a lot more detail. Do you think when soil has gotten so dry to the point it becomes hydrophobic, poking it with a stick as you did in the video before watering tackles the issue once and for all? Or should we eventually repot the plant as the soil might ultimately stay hydrophobic? This is a great question from Odd Therapy on one of my recent videos where I mentioned poking the soil a few times to aerate it to help get moisture in when it's become hydrophobic. This is such a common issue as the soil of our plants become more and more compact over time, almost repels the water we give it. If the poking soil trick doesn't work, then the best way to fully hydrate soil is to totally submerge the root ball in some water for a good few minutes. You'll notice little air bubbles in the water as the air is displaced by the water. When it stops, you know the soil is fully saturated and the roots are hydrated. I bought a black Alocasia and when I brought it home it turned light green. Why and what can I do? The problem here is simple and so is the solution. Your black Alocasia is not getting enough light. When this happens, they lose their black pigmentation and start to turn green. Put it in a much brighter spot and it should darken up again. I keep mine in front of my east facing window so it gets about 5 hours of direct early morning sun a day and the leaves have no trouble staying black. I'm looking at my poor plants and waiting till spring to transplant. I like to wait another month, but I think some of them better be transplanted sooner rather than later, otherwise they might not make it. This is a trap lots of folks fall into. If your plant is in desperate need of a repot, then don't wait for the right time to repot it. There is no right time. They can be repotted any time of year. No harm will come to it if you repot it in winter. Roots continue to grow in winter almost as much as in the summer. Crystal sent me a couple of pictures on Instagram of her cactus that was showing a strange white growth. She said she scraped it off, but it came back. Alarm bells were ringing off in my head, and I immediately thought mealybugs. The white growth you can see on the plant are the eggs of this annoying bug. Amazingly, Crystal owns a microscope. She took a closer look, and there they are, sucking the life out of her cactus. Mealybugs aren't as bad a bug infestation as something like spider mites or thrips. All you need to do is clear them off the plant and apply rubbing alcohol over the area to make sure they don't come back. And for a full guide on this bug and other popular houseplant pests with details of how to control them, make sure you watch the video here by clicking on the link.